sponsored by Premier Guns.
Evening everybody, how are we all doing? Hope you're all managing to stay nice and warm in this quite literally freezing weather. So today's show, I want to focus on lead. Now, not necessarily lead shot, although there is going to be a bit of that, but just some of the bare facts about lead, because there is a conversation going around at the minute. Admittedly, I did start one yesterday. I'm going to give you some key things about lead. And the first thing to bear in mind is that this isn't an attack on shooting. Okay, like we saw with asbestos in the building industry, you will have seen lead banned from petrol, remember 4-star? We've seen it banned from paint, we've even seen it banned from pencils. I mean, there's data from UNICEF that say 1/3 of the world's children are subject to lead poisoning. Don't worry, because I am going to dig deeper into this. But first, let's look at one of my favourite things in the whole world, and that's a shotgun and gun of the week this week. Right, it's actually a steel shot proof side by side. And I just want you to know I am not ramming steel shot down anybody's throat. There is nothing better than lead for killing things. I know that. I'm on your side. I do believe that lead is the best thing, but we're going to look at why we need to change. So moving on from your selective safety, you can see all around here, it's nicely engraved, and yet they've kept the top lever at first appearances simple and sleek. Let's focus on this profile here. That profile there, it's stylish, but it's also functional. That, as a design, which Beretta are obviously very well known for their design and their creativity and all their Italian pizzazz, shall we say. Very, very smooth, very, very sleek. It is 486 Parallelo. Now, there is a full review coming on this. I love the way they've engraved it. I like the low profile rounded body. Obviously, I like the fact that it's a side-by-side. This is a 10 to 5.5mm tapered rib you've got on this gun. You can see the single trigger and the pistol grip is something which we've seen it come through with the RFM before now. It's ideal for people that are trying to transition over from an over and under. They're wanting to try something different. This comes in 28 and 30-inch barrels. There are a couple available at Premier Guns. One went out the door when I was there yesterday. A gentleman bought a 20-bore version of that. Not sure how many of those there are left. But this is a really, really nice gun, and it's something that's a little bit different as well. So do take a look at that. I'll put a link in the description for you. Right, let's get back to what I can only describe as the Lead Saga. Now, as you know, they did the consultation, they've had the review, and essentially it's boiled down to two things. Number one, lead in the food chain, and number two, whether you've got the ability to clear up after yourself. We have done historically quite well out of it. They're not banning lead with air guns, for example, and the paper shows some quite interesting figures. Please bear in mind that the interested parties were, of course, BASC, the CPSA, the Countryside Alliance have been involved, the GTA have been at the last meeting. Our own interested parties estimate just over 7,000 tonnes of lead are being shot by us per year. That's quite a lot, certainly a lot higher than I would have thought. Obviously, we know that lead is a naturally occurring substance anyway and belongs to what I would describe as the Earth's core. Now, we all remember the Mad Hatter with his hat of lead, working with lead, that was where it came from, and apparently it causes defects in children, it causes lesions on birds, and the risk to wildlife is one of the main things that we're looking at. You'll also be aware there's primary and secondary ingestion and dangers with lead. The primary is, of course, the birds coming along, eating lead shot. And as we've just seen, there is a lot of lead shot around, particularly in the countryside. So, yeah, it's not necessarily safe. They haven't, by their own admittance, done any investigation into the blood levels of it in humans. That this report confirms that there has been no UK-specific measured data on the impact of game meat consumption on blood lead levels has been identified. So they haven't done a study into the levels of lead in the blood from people eating game. However, they have come up with an estimate Now, the interested parties, BAS, the CPSA, and National Gamekeepers Organisation, all our close friends, have come up with an estimate that 44,500 people in this country are eating game once a week. They've now come back, this report has come back and said that if people ate just over 5 game meals per week, then that would result in an increase of a 1% blood pressure rise, the systolic level. You know, from the machine, diastolic, systolic, yeah, we've all done that from Boots, yeah. It's saying it'd be a 1% increase. That's if you ate game just over 5 times a week. So there are things which are very revealing in this document. There is stuff that I'm not happy with. One of the things which I find to be very, very suspicious indeed is this. The UK estimates population. Now look at this. An estimate, this is about the amount of birds that could die from primary ingestion of lead shot. The estimate, right, is between 16,100 to 804,000. With a discrepancy like that, I'm afraid I can't take that seriously. And the same applies to the amount of game birds that are released. They sort of say it's between 40 million and 57 million. Well, I'm sorry, that's a discrepancy of 17 million. You know, it is just not good enough. It's not good enough to be taken seriously, and I don't necessarily think that is. However, there are things that need to be taken seriously, and most of all, it is to do with the fact that there is no safe levels of lead. It says there have been no GB studies investigating the concentration of lead in surface waters or groundwaters from sites where lead ammunition is used. We all know that it's illegal to shoot birds with lead if they're waterfowl. We know that you cannot shoot lead shot at ducks or anything that is near water because it's illegal. And that's not something which I've encountered anybody doing at all. And the people that are most on the side of steel are the wildfowlers themselves because they've been using it for years. That's not to say that I'm pro-steel, anti-steel. I'm just letting you know a core fact. Right, let's take a look at what any proposed restriction would cost this industry. Now, bearing in mind the delays on licensing, the problems with doctors, cost the gun trade an absolute fortune because it's sales that they can't be having. Now, let's look. The document addresses how much any transition away from lead would cost the gun trade. Let's see what it says. Cartridge and filling machinery, 6 million. Injection molding machinery, nearly 3 million. Interesting how it's like 2.98 million. Look at that, an estimated £21.1 million. That's quite a lot, isn't it? That is quite a lot. This is for a complete transition, and over 20 years, here we have it. £1.237 million. Oh my life, that is a lot, isn't it? That is a lot. Crikey, man. There's no figures that include the cost to the NHS as a result of lead poisoning. I don't personally know of anybody that's been poisoned by lead. I can't find any further details other than the example that I've given you in America. If you know of anybody that has been poisoned by lead, please do get in touch with me. As you can see from this report, it does say that you would need to eat nearly 6 game meals a week to experience a 1% rise in blood pressure. Yeah, it's not ideal, but we do know that lead is a toxic substance, and we do know that we are trying to be more environmentally healthy, and we do know that it is a danger to birds if they're eating lead shot. It's obviously also a big danger to birds if they're flying through the air and we happen to hit them with it. There is nothing more effective than killing them than lead. So we do know there's neurodevelopmental impacts, as they call it, so lead can affect the brain. And they also say about chronic kidney disease, known as CKD. They call it increased incidence of chronic kidney disease. Now, If there's a restriction on lead shot, they're saying that it's going to be of benefit, environmental benefit, because birds are not going to be killed by primary poisoning, they're not going to be killed by secondary poisoning. There are incidences, many instances of birds being killed by both. Okay, that's non-negotiable. I'm buying that completely. If we look here, it does say there's going to be a saving due to the abolition of risk of chronic kidney disease. The paper goes on to admit that there is uncertainty about the proportion of ammunition-derived lead that is absorbed or how much blood lead levels are increased. There's very limited information on how game meat consumption affects blood lead levels in hunter families, and there's a lack of reliable information on how it affects it. So, just to finalise on what I've been saying, this is not an attack on shooting. This is about getting a toxic substance out of society. So I just wanted to put your mind at ease. They're not saying that lead's killing people left, right and centre, but it is a danger, and it has been a danger for years, and we have seen it eradicated from other areas, and we will continue to see it eradicated from other areas. And, you know, shooting is one of those things. It will take primary legislation, and it's not going to be necessarily easy to ban it, but yeah, I think we're all ready for it. I don't think it'd come as a big shock if they banned lead tomorrow. But they're not looking at banning lead tomorrow. They're looking at doing a transition over 5 years, which we've already begun a voluntary transition, didn't we? Which we're already over halfway through. So well done to everybody for getting on board. If you want to see what it's like, you know, there's plenty of cartridges about. People will be able to help. You could go to a vast sustainable ammunition day. You could do all kinds of things. Please do keep your comments coming, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate your input. I hope this gives you some kind of information and reassurance. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week with way more industry news than this. Remember, you can respond to the latest consultation with your thoughts. Be kind, be gentle. I'll put a link in the description for you. Let me know what you think. Take care. Bye-bye.
With Alex.